I'm Kim McCleary, President and CEO of the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. Thank you all so very much for joining us today, and a big welcome to all of our new members and viewers across the United States. Thank you all for your ongoing support of the Council Town Hall through your contributions, by becoming members, and by renewing your memberships. As one member recently mentioned to me, that the need for our informed, nonpartisan discussions is more critical than ever before. We will continue to have these live streams be a key part of our programming going forward. And as soon as we can do so safely, we will resume all of our in-person programs. Those in-person programs were a key part of our revenues. Today, we are providing these live streams free as a public service. So that's why we need you more than ever. Please visit our website at LAWAC.org to see how you can support this continued quality programming. It's now my great pleasure to introduce today's program, focusing on what is the future of international travel and tourism, a partnered program with the Los Angeles World Trade Center. Stephen Cheung, President and CEO of the LA Trade Center, will be moderating today's program. Our panelists include Justin Erbacci, CEO, Los Angeles World Airports, Dana Debel, Managing Director, Government Affairs at Delta, and Javier Cano, Vice President and Market General Manager for Marriott Properties in Los Angeles. For those of you who are joining us online, we will be taking questions in about 20 minutes. There's a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen where you can type in your questions. Our Vice President of Events, Jessica DeGanzik, will be managing your questions during the Q&A portion of today's program. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible. Now, Stephen, it's time for me to turn this over to you. Thank you again for doing the moderation of today's wonderful program. Take care.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and it's a pleasure to be partnering with the World Affairs Council once again on this very important conversation. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Justin, Dana, and Javier on this very important conversation. You heard from Kim the introduction and the role that they play, but I think it will be important for us to set the context in terms of how we're going to have this conversation, why we're having this conversation before we get to the details. And for the audience members, I encourage you to start drafting your questions right now and start entering it because there's going to be a lot of dialogue later on that we're going to be able to discuss with our panelists. Let's take a step back a little bit before we get started with kind of the current situation. At the beginning of 2020, the year was looking very strong for Los Angeles. In fact, the LA County Economic Development Corporation, which is a parent company for the World Trade Center, we did a forecast looking at kind of the increase and the impact it's going to have on our local economy, especially when it comes to international trade, international travel, and tourism, and all's looking very strong. At the end of 2019, LAX was I think reach about 88 million passengers going through LAX, becoming, I think at that point, the third busiest airport in the world, moving from the rank of fourth to third, which is a big, big deal. On top of that, LAX being the second busiest airport in the nation, is directly related to about 620,000 jobs. As an economic development corporation, this is what we're really focused on in terms of the impact it has. And of course, we at LAX have many, many different airlines, but Delta being one of the most important ones, putting over $1.86 billion in investments, planning for the future of what Delta is going to do for the airports, as well as their connectivity with the rest of the world. Also, they had an announcement earlier in the year as well in terms of their partnership with the LA 2028 Olympics, where everybody's very excited about the future. And of course, all that is directly related to our tourism and hotel industry. And I think in 2018, Mayor Garcetti celebrated over 50 million passengers, 50 million visitors coming to Los Angeles, spending well over $23 billion in the local economy, which directly has an economic impact of about $36.6 billion to the local economy. This is equivalent to about 525,000 direct jobs and jobs around the tourism industry. So all these, you can understand why it's so important to the Los Angeles, and especially for organizations like the World Trade Center Los Angeles, where we're focused on international trade and focused on job creation. Now, everything changed very quickly in March when COVID-19, the pandemic around the world, has really impacted us. And what we're hoping to do today is to have a conversation to learn more about the current states of affairs. But I think a lot of folks over the last few months have been joining a lot of different webinars, wanting to find out more about what's next. Because I think the current state has been very devastating to our economy, but I think everybody wants that silver lining. Everybody wants to see the hopeful future. So again, I'm delighted to be joined by Justin, Dana, and Javier on this very important conversation. With that said, I'm going to start just basically with a set of questions, and then later on bringing the audience to be able to ask some questions directly to our panelists as well. Why don't we start with Justin? Justin, in terms of passenger traffic, we're talking a bit earlier about the 88 million passengers coming through LAX. This is becoming one of the global destinations around the world, and it's looking great for us in 2020, at the beginning of 2020. So all of a sudden, we're hearing that the capacity, or not the capacity, but the volume through LAX has dropped significantly, something to the tune of about 90% reduction. So can you talk a bit more about what are the challenges you're facing as an operator for this world-class airport, and what that means to the region? Justin?
Yes, thanks, Stephen. So we faced a lot of challenges, both first in dealing with the impacts of the pandemic when it first came, and then more recently, our challenges are how do we recover from that pandemic, and how do we get customers to feel comfortable to come back to the airports. In both of those instances, the real key challenges is that keeping our employees and our passengers safe and providing healthy environment for them to travel in. That's the work, and that's always been number one, will be maintained as a most important factor. Then we had to deal with the operational changes and new ways of working with less employees due to people going out with exposure to COVID, or because of the movement restrictions that were implemented by the LA Department of Health. And then, of course, dealing with the economic impacts. So in the beginning, dealing with the impacts of the pandemic, there was no playbook here. So we were very busy trying to figure out how do we screen passengers in conjunction with CDC? What do we do with the passengers? How do we develop cleaning and sanitizing? How do we adjust to telecommuting and the fewer resources that we have? And then very important, how do we deal in the short term with revenue hits to help both us and our partners remain viable? So those were the initial impacts that we dealt with. As we got through that initial period, then the focus changed and became to looking at how do we recover now? How do we get people back in this airport and feel comfortable to come back and feel that air flying is safe? So we've implemented a recovery task force to engage in that. Our work streams, including looking how our employees come back to work, how we get passengers back to work, how we review new technologies to create touch lists and clean experience. Of course, we are doing fiscal responsibility with our budget, and then looking over our organizational structure and how do we take advantage of this crisis to gain efficiencies and to be better and make improvements in the way we operate. So those are all things we're looking at. The biggest challenges we're having now in doing this is getting a consistent approach towards how we keep the passengers safe across not only the United States network, but also internationally. We're doing a lot of work with our counterparts in both the United States and internationally to try to develop some types of common standards there and to try to lobby for a consistent process. And I know that the airlines are doing something similar. We also have to, one of the biggest challenges in the airport is how do we maintain the proper physical distancing in facilities that weren't meant for that, weren't built for that. And that's going to be a biggest challenge. And as people queue for TSA, as they queue for check-in, as they queue for customs and immigration, how are we going to keep them physically distanced? How do we keep them physically distanced in hold rooms that weren't meant to keep people 6 feet apart by definition? So that's one of the things. And of course, financially, we're all being devastated by the lack of passengers here. I mean, we were down 95, 96% for a long time. We've recently come back up. We're only about 86, 87% down. We yesterday, I think, were the most screened passengers since this pandemic started, which is very positive. But we still are being devastated from a revenue perspective. And we have to try to figure out how do we continue to keep up our very robust $14 billion capital program in the midst of this huge downturn. So those are our biggest challenges we face right now.
Got it. Thank you so much, Justin. You're talking about having to quickly adjust to the social distancing aspect in the space that's not built for it. I want to bring this next question to Dana. I think that's going to be a major question for folks. We're hearing new policies being instituted in various airlines, and in the airport, it's already challenging enough to be able to do it. How do you actually do that in the plane in terms of social distancing? So can you talk a bit about these new policies that's been instituted and what Delta and your airline's doing to ensure the safety of the passengers? Dana, you're on mute still.
Yeah. So we're taking safety very, very, very seriously. We have instituted a program that we call Delta Clean, that is from curb to claim. And so we are trying to partner with our airports and own the cleanliness and the safety of the entire process. So that's everything from before you check in, you're going to have reminders about what we would like you to do to reduce touch points and keep yourself safe going through the airport experience. So wearing a mask, downloading the app so that you're controlling your boarding pass on your device rather than passing a piece of paper back and forth. And then packing snacks that you can have on the aircraft as well. So again, you're in control of your own food. We've installed plexiglass now at all of our check-in locations in every airport that we operate in. So there's plexiglass at the check-in counter. We are cleaning all the touch points on the kiosks multiple times a day. We have social distancing markers that we've put in the airport, and that starts from check-in and goes all the way through to bag claim, where we have social distancing. We have social distancing markers on the boarding bridges. We're boarding planes from back to front, so that and 10 passengers at a time, so that you don't have to walk past other passengers. We are enforcing masks on the aircraft, and I think you're going to see us actually step that up and be even more strong about that, because we continue to hear from all medical experts that that's the best thing that can be done to help with limiting the spread of the disease. We have put in place a hard cap on our aircraft, so no plane will go out at more than 60% capacity. We are blocking middle seats. This is not a we're going to try. We are doing this, and we've committed to that through at least the end of September, with obviously the plan to potentially extend it if we need to. We are doing a deep clean of all of our aircraft on every turn, meaning that all surfaces, all tray tables, all armrests, seats, the bins, the handles on the handle parts on the bins are getting wiped, and then we are going through with a hospital grade electrostatic sprayer, and we are spraying down the aircraft with a hospital grade level disinfectant that basically neutralizes any virus or bacteria, and then when it lands on the surface, and then it effectively is gone by the time that people start boarding the aircraft. So we are also handing out hygiene packets to any passengers who need it. It's a Purell wipe and a mask. And we are providing masks and hand sanitizer at multiple locations. And we are also handing people a snack bag in lieu of normal food service. And that snack bag has a water bottle, and it has Purell wipe, and then some prepackaged snacks, and all of that's wrapped in plastic. So we are taking multiple steps throughout the process to make sure that people feel that they are safe and everything. We're also deplaning. I mean, I think you all know this. You've been on a flight, you land, the seatbelt light goes off, and everybody pops up out of their seats. We are announcing pre-arrival multiple times, and we're working hard to make this happen. we are calling rows to deplane. So basically, we are calling for certain rows to stand up and deplane and the rest of the aircraft to stay seated. And in that way, we are able to maintain social distancing even through the deplaning process. So we are taking it very seriously. We've had great cooperation with partners like Justin. And if anybody would actually like to see it in action, we are starting to do some tours out at LAX so people can see what this actually looks like if they want to see it before they travel. And so I'd invite you to reach out to Stephen or Jessica after this if you'd like to come and see it for yourselves.
Perfect. I would like to see it myself. I've been itching to get out. So I think a lot of us are antsy to get back on the plane. Obviously, the plane volume as people are able to travel has had a huge impact on our one of the most important industry, which is our hospitality industry here in Los Angeles. And the JW Marriott being one of the primary and key hotel establishments in Los Angeles and Southern California, being at the heart of LA Live. It's obviously that's changed quite a bit. I was just looking at some numbers. I was looking at the April numbers and saw that occupancy rate in Los Angeles County is now down to 25.6%, which is down 68% from year to year from last year, which is a very shocking number. Javier, can you talk a little bit about what's been happening to your property in particular and the hotel industry? And are there any signs of hope for the future?
Well, good morning, Stephen. I tell you that our industry, as you know, has been one of the ones that has been devastated, one of the most. We've had a significant amount of impact that's taken place. You quote the numbers, and the 25% includes all types of hotels here in LA County. At one point, at the worst, half the hotels were closed, and tens of thousands of people were laid off. I think the numbers are close to 200,000. My hotel alone had to lay off 1,000 people that normally work here. So we were open, the other half of the hotels, and they were open for essential travel only. And so that was, as you can imagine, a very, very small number. Most of the full service hotels throughout the county were running somewhere between 1% and 4% occupancies. So it was and has not been very good. So there are signs of life. We, of course, follow a lot of what happens with the airlines. And as their passenger traffic starts to pick up, it is one of the essential feeders of our industry and our business. Most importantly, however, recently, within the last few days, the state of California, the governor's office has indicated that they are opening up, allowing the counties to open up the hotels. And so we're very, very excited about that. And that's going to make a material difference for us. And we are hopeful to hear within the next day or two from the County of Los Angeles. If all the things go right, it is a very strong possibility that hotels could open as early as this weekend. And that's going to make a material difference for a lot of us, a lot of people who've been sheltering in place and are looking forward to getting out. And we are looking forward to welcoming people to hotels and having an opportunity. The industry has been working very closely with the county. I sit on the LA County Resiliency Task Force, and in that space, I've had about 25 of my colleagues across the county, from very, very small hotels to very, very large ones, being in a position to be able to provide feedback to the county on the procedures and protocols that are put in place to be able to welcome people back. So we're looking forward to that. We're looking forward to getting people back to work. And our industry has really been devastated, and we're hoping to turn the corner and hoping to have the opportunity to have people on board soon.
That's great. That's great to hear. I know there are a lot of questions are starting to roll in, so I want to leave time for our audience member to be able to ask some questions. But I want to maybe quickly kind of ask the same line of question in terms of the hope for the future. Dana, you seeing any patterns, any new trends? Folks like myself are antsy to get back out there. I've been hearing that a lot of folks are now kind of exploring. RV sales been going through the roof, but the thing is, they're not quite there yet. But people are really wanting to get out there. Are you seeing any?
Well, we're off the bottom, right? So we absolutely bottomed out in March and April, with ridiculously low numbers. We are off the bottom, but we are still maybe 15% of what we were in versus this time last year. So we have a long way to go. We are seeing travel come back, but what I would say is all of the traditional methods that we have used in the past to forecast demand, we've pretty much had to throw those out the window, because the overlay of sort of government restrictions and not necessarily knowing if and when the next hotspot or spike is going to come, all of those things impact travel, and they're not things that have historically factored into really our forecast modeling. And so it's a much different game today than it ever has been in the past. I think we are absolutely starting to see a return, particularly of leisure travel. I think people are wanting to get back out there and do some exploring after being in lockdowns for so many months. So we are starting to see some green shoots, if you will, but we have a long way to go.
Got it. And following up with that, Justin, LAX, we heard on June 4th, Lufthansa are resuming the flight from Munich to LAX back and forth. So that's another good sign. Wanted to, besides just kind of seeing the positive pattern of resuming international flights, how are you working with kind of the CBP and immigration officials and maybe other countries as well to look at the pattern, and how do you facilitate that? I mean, LAX being really connected to so many different regions, I think a lot of folks are eyeing LAX. I'm sure that's a big job. So can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you're facing in terms of talking to all these different groups and countries?
Sure. From the very beginning, we established a task force with our federal partners here that includes CBP, TSA, the FAA, and CDC as well. So we from the very beginning have had talks and figuring out how we collaborate. And we've done things like consolidate the FIS in one of our terminals to try to gain some optimizations for the operations here. And we've been in a lot of changes to the way TSA works and CBP and CDC for that matter. So we have a constant dialogue with them on the federal front. We're also talking with those agencies in Washington to help to influence some of the changes that we need to make to help make our terminals safer for passengers, as well as to develop consistent processes so it's the same across the network. We're also working with, we have a group of 9 international hub airports that we deal with on a regular basis, and we have been developing different standards to help try to promote travel between our airports. And we will continue to do that, and we're developing different standards, and we are using some of the types of protocols that we want to take to Washington on our side, and each airport will take their own governments to try to help influence a consistent approach internationally as well. We're also working with different groups to understand how we can implement new technologies in the airport to make the terminals more safe, and also to have the process be more touchless. We're going to be doing a pilot on temperature checks as people come into the airport to see how that technology works. We're looking at how we can incorporate testing into protocols with international destinations as well. And we're working with our companies to develop, or actually enhance, we already have it, a touchless commerce scenario where people can order and purchase things on their mobile devices and then just pick them up at the concession stand. So there doesn't have to be this touch situation going on. So there's lots of different efforts that we're doing with lots of different groups to try to move this forward and make travel safe again. I can tell you that, just as Dana and Delta are doing all types of cleaning and in their airplanes and in their facilities, our facilities here at LAX have never been more clean, more sanitized than they ever were. We've implemented so many new techniques to clean all of the areas, restrooms, floors. We're using UV ultraviolet light to sanitize the air. So this place has never been cleaner and safer for people to come and travel.
Great, that's great. At this point, again, we've been getting a lot of questions coming in from the audience members, so I want to pass it to Jessica from World Affairs Council to field some of these questions to our panelists. Jessica?
Thank you so much. Yes, we have a ton of questions coming in, so I will just right off the bat, I think this is for Justin, but also a little bit for Dana. How is mask wearing going to be enforced, particularly when people are up in the air and then they decide that they want to take their mask off?
Dana, I'll start in the
I'll
airport.
field this one.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Justin.
No, I just want to say from our perspective, we are requiring all people who are in the airport facilities to be wearing a facial covering at all times. So that's just our policy. And then I'll let Dana take it from there.
Yeah. So we are providing masks at check-in at the counter, but where we are really sort of checking for masks, if you will, is through the boarding process, and that's where we are, asking people if they don't have their mask on when they're boarding to stop and put a mask on, or we are providing them a mask to put on if they don't have one or say lost one. It's especially if you're traveling with kids, it could have come off at some point and then, well, where is it? Well, they left it in the bathroom, right? So we have the free masks available for them to put back on, but we're really enforcing it in the boarding process. We are announcing it in our pre-flight and post-departure announcements. We do know people will need to eat and drink, and so obviously to do that, they will need to take their masks off. So the announcement essentially is, please keep your mask on unless you are eating or drinking, in which case we ask that you replace the mask once you are done. So we are taking a pretty firm stance on it. Again, once people are on the aircraft, because we are blocking middle seats and because we are capping at 60%, because we have HEPA grade filters filtering the air in the aircraft, and that air is fully exchanged every 2 to 3 minutes, depending on which type of aircraft you're on. On the aircraft, there's a lot of other parameters in place, but we are taking it seriously and we are asking folks to comply. And in general, we are seeing good compliance with it. It is not something in general that we have had a problem with to date.
Thank you. Javier, are Marriott hotels making mask wearing mandatory like Delta Airlines is doing? If not, why not?
Yeah, I think that what you're going to find is that what's being asked for masks is going to vary by jurisdiction. So for example, in Los Angeles, it is mandatory to wear masks. So people will be asked if they arrive, if they're not wearing a mask, similar to what Dana's doing at Delta, is that we'll be providing masks for people. All of our staff will be wearing masks, and that will just be the norm. So right now in Los Angeles, that is absolutely the case. And a lot of that we defer to what is going on in the jurisdiction that the hotels are in. But by and large, from a company perspective, it is something that we are going to be doing, is all of our staff will be having masks.
Thank you so much. Justin, can you talk about what's being done on for the shuttles or people trying to get to a taxi or an Uber or to one of the lots?
Yes, certainly. So we continue to have some busing to our LA exit location where people will pick up taxi cabs and TNCs, Ubers or Lyfts. We do have more taxi stands available inside of the CTA. So there are pretty much taxi cabs within walking distance of all of the terminals at this point. But for those who are traveling, who have to get on a bus, and you could still walk to LA exit from many of our terminals, we encourage people to do that. For those who have to get on the bus or need to get on the bus, we have instilled different types of policies. So everybody who gets on a bus has to wear a facial covering. We only allow a certain number of people on every bus so that the people can maintain a proper physical distancing. And so we're doing everything we can from a cleanliness standpoint and a safety protocol standpoint to make sure that anybody who has to take the bus to the LA exit is doing so in a safe manner.
Thank you. Dana, do you have any studies on how effective the HEPA air filters are against COVID?
Yeah, so they are basically 99% effective against viruses and bacteria. They are the same level that you would find in many clinical environments. So they're very effective, and we've been we have a partnership with Mayo Clinic, and we have been, in constant contact with them since the beginning of this, and have actually brought in some of their industrial engineers to work with our industrial engineers, both in the airport environment as well as in the aircraft environment. And they've made some suggestions about things that we can change, and we're taking those very seriously. And so some of the things that we've done have been at the suggestion of Mayo and their leadership and their industrial engineers.
Thank you. Justin, back to you. Are the same things happening internationally? Will Americans be able to travel abroad by the end of the year?
So every country has its own set of restrictions in place. Anybody needs to be checking with the location of the country they're going to see what the restrictions are. I think that they will ease as we're hoping anyway that they will ease those restrictions, including our own, as the curve goes down in most of the countries. But it's very difficult at this point to say when that's going to happen. But we certainly hope it happens soon.
Thank you. This is a question for Stephen. Not to put you on the spot, but when will you feel comfortable going to airports and getting on planes again? What destinations would you go to, and what would you not?
Oh, wow. So I'm ready to go now. I want to go now. It basically depends on whether the countries will let me in. One of the issues is that if I'm going to be going there, I might be quarantined there for 14 days. So there goes my vacation. So it really depends on the international partnership. But if I can, New Zealand would probably be one of my first spots to go. I love that country. Second of all, I heard that they have a 0 infection rate for over 12 days already. So they've been doing their tracing and control very well. So I think that's going to be one of the key destinations that I would love to be able to just go and check out. But with that question, I would like to actually kind of think about from a domestic side, if I can actually pose another question to the group as well, is that LAX, we were mentioning, international, that obviously is a huge component of what we do, but domestic travel is a huge component of that too. And now with the NBA season moving to Orlando, with NHL, with MLB, unknown, likely not going to be in the Los Angeles region, and Los Angeles really being the sports center of the United States for not now, but for the next 10 years, whether it's the Clippers, the Lakers, the Dodgers, the Kings, the Anaheim Ducks, all of them are located here. And with all those potential visitors not coming over here, how is that going to impact us specifically, Javier? Is that going to impact kind of your projection, given that you guys are located right there, LA Live, where a whole, and this goes with the concerts as well. What are you planning?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. If you think about our hotel, we are a hotel that holds large gatherings in a state that large gatherings aren't allowed to happen. So it is a challenge, no doubt about that. But obviously, the outlook is going to be a positive one eventually. So what happens in the meantime? How do you bridge the gap between now and then? So we got to look at alternative ways of making yourself or any business more viable. I think what's going to happen first is that you're going to have people that are going to take a step out, and they're going to travel a little bit more locally, right? We're going to try to travel a little bit further than we did from our home and start to extend that reach. You asked a question about your first travel. Well, we have a industry event in Las Vegas that I'm going to in September. So I'm looking forward to getting on a plane, but like many people, you'll get on a plane a little bit, then you'll go a little further, a little further, a little further. The same is going to be for travel. We see locally, we're going to see people that will open up, and I think a lot of people will drive to places here in California to start off, and I think that's where hotels are well positioned throughout the city, and including ourselves here in downtown, where we have an opportunity to highlight a lot of the things that happen here in downtown, the restaurants, the museums, etc. Give people a reason to get out and a chance to go and enjoy in an environment where they're now going to have a little bit of opportunity to go and visit.
Great.
Thank you so much. Justin, this one's for you. What plans do you have for protecting disabled passengers who require wheelchair assistance and who want to use rideshare? And they note that at LAX, you don't have curbside pickup.
All of the buses that we have to bring people to rideshare are equipped with ramps for people who have wheelchair access. So they are available, and there is assistance that the bus driver will get out and help you. And once you get at the LA exit lot, there are people available there they wheel ahead. They radio ahead and tell the people at the lot that there's somebody who is using a wheelchair, and they will then pick them up from the LA exit lot and bring them to their either their Lyft or their Uber or their taxi. As far as cleanliness, we will ensure we're constantly cleaning the buses regularly. And as a matter of fact, we're not having that many passengers right now, so it's much easier for us to maintain them and keep them clean. But we are committed to making sure that those buses, traveling on those buses, is safe and healthy.
Thank you so much. Just as a follow-up to that too, is there or will there be any quarantine requirements for international travelers flying into LAX? And how are these passengers being notified so that they're aware of this information when they fly into our city?
So there are quarantines as we speak. So today, any passenger that's arriving from China, from Brazil, from Iran, from Schengen countries, Europe, do have to go through 14 days of isolation. It's a self-quarantine. It's not where they're brought to a facility. And those are the ones that we're aware of now. And different countries around the world have different policies. So again, it's very important for people when they're traveling to check with our government and with the countries that they're going to fly to understand what the restrictions are, because you don't want to end up going somewhere and getting stuck in a hotel for 14 days.
Thank you. For Dana, if a passenger comes down with COVID, will Delta notify the other passengers on that flight?
Yeah, so we have been, since the beginning of this, following the CDC protocols for track and trace and notification. So if we have had a positive test, we go through a process of contacting CDC, and then through them, the local health agency, whether it's the State Department of the Health or a county Department of Health, depending on the jurisdiction. And then the contact tracing goes on through those protocols.
Thank you so much. Javier, just wondering if you can talk a little bit about, Stephen touched on this a little bit, but how Marriott is going to be doing conventions, any sort of convening, or even weddings and events like that, which are obviously have all been postponed right now.
Yeah, the meetings and gathering business is one of the biggest part of hotels, and it is one of them that is not allowed yet in the state of California. Guidelines are going to be given by the state when it's time to reopen. We're actively working both here at the county level and at the state level to provide input on these very highly impactful events. So, for example, a lot of what's been talked about by my colleagues here on the call today, a lot of social distancing. We're going to have an active use of barriers, for example, that if you can think of attending an event, any kind of an event, where you come in, there's a registration function. Well, that's going to look different in the future. You'll have somebody that will be in either behind a barrier or with some type of face shield. If you think of going up and getting yourself a cup of coffee, well, that's not going to happen anymore. An attendant will have to present coffee, and then again, that'll be behind some type of barrier. The same thing is going to be if you think about being in a room, we will be actively looking at 6-foot spacing, and that roughly cuts the occupancy down about 33% to about 33% for the number of people that can actually be in a space. So if you used to be able to have a big room where you could put 1,000 people, your number has just shrunk dramatically. So we're looking at all the different things that are necessary. We're working with the agencies both here locally and on the state level to be able to get those guidelines so that we can not only open and have these events, but equally as important is that we can plan them so that we can say with confidence that if you're trying to do something in September, October, at any time frame in the future, that we can sit down with you and say, okay, here's what we are going to be able to do, and here are the guidelines. We are fortunate that in our industry, there's been a lot of good effort that's been done by a lot of big umbrella agencies such as American Hotel Lodging Association, California Hotel Lodging Association, a lot of individual efforts, every company, every brand out there, our own. Marriott's got a commitment to clean. Some of our partners such as PSAV, Freeman, et cetera, they've all put protocols out, and many of those in the meeting space that give some very, very good information on how we're going to handle traffic flows, how we're going to monitor things such as elevator use, bathroom use, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a significant amount of details, but rest assured that we're working very, very hard to have all these in place. So when it comes time for us to be able to say, you can have a meeting, that we'll be ready to have them.
Thank you so much. This one would probably be to both Dana and Javier. While you're trying to impose all of these new procedures and having to restrict your capacity, what impact will we see on prices, and how do you make sure it's not cost prohibitive to get your industries back going again?
I'll go first. I mean, it's a supply and demand model at the end of the day. And so if we don't price at a point where people are willing to buy, then, they won't travel. So just like if we don't do these safety protocols, we feel and really stick to them, they can't be a marketing exercise. They have to be real. And with us, they are. And they're indefinite. If we don't do those things to restore confidence, customers won't travel. So it's going to be a real challenge. At some point in the future, when demand comes back, truly comes back, hopefully by then there'll be a vaccine, there'll be widespread, immunity, and we'll be able to, return to a more normal business protocol. But certain things are going to be here to stay, and our cleaning protocols, for example, we're not looking at changing those, and that does impact our turn time on the ground. So it's going to be a different model. But like I said, if we don't price to a point where people are willing to pay it, then we're just flying in empty seats.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Dana says, that the customer ultimately is going to take a look and say whether the services at the perceived value or not. I think another key component is really going to boil down to a lot of education, right? We're going to need to educate the customer in a lot of what we're doing, as well as in the arena of events. There's going to be a lot of education that's going to be taking place among different companies, among different entities, and what they're going to be looking to expect. So I think that we do a lot of the education on the expectations, make sure everything is clearly defined up front. What's the experience we want to have take place? And then I think that we're going to have to do the best we can under the circumstances. But I agree that ultimately you're going to have a product that's going to be priced in a certain way, and the customer is going to speak as to whether or not that's a product that they're going to be willing to buy.
Jessica, can I jump with a follow-up to that? As we're looking at recovery, we're hearing some of the other countries, specifically Japan. I've read that they are looking at subsidizing future travel to maybe even subsidize half of the travel costs so that they can increase tourism. Delta being a partner that flies into Tokyo, we've been devastated because we were really looking forward to the 2020 Olympic game that got postponed to next year. Are you hearing anything in terms of the other countries that are reaching out to Delta and potential partnership to increase international travel and subsidizing some of that fee to lower the costs? Sorry, that's for Dana.
You're breaking up a little bit there at the end, so I apologize for that, Stephen. But I think your question was, have any of the countries started reaching out to us about generating international travel demand? And I'm not aware of that, but it's a good question and something that I can check on with our folks. You know, we think domestic is going to come back before international. And to go back to a question that was asked earlier about international travel restrictions, just to give folks a sense, I mean, we are daily tracking 283 different countries' travel restrictions right now. So at Delta, and they are changing daily. And so it is just keeping on top of that and making sure that we are doing the things that are required to comply with those travel restrictions has been a real challenge. There's been a lot of media you've probably seen in the last week or so about flights with China. And in essence, we had been allowing Chinese flights into the US and not imposing really dramatic restrictions on crews, whereas China was basically saying we could only fly. They put a lot of restrictions in place that was making it basically impossible for US carriers to fly to China. And so that's been the impetus for that. So so there's going to be a fair amount of that, I think, and negotiation between the countries, the federal governments, the national governments, that's going to need to take place in some of these cases to get us on level playing fields, country to country, to have the travel come back.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you. For Justin, what changes is TSA implementing? Obviously, we know about pat downs and things like that. And I know that Dana mentioned there will be a lot more cleaning procedures around TSA, but maybe you can speak on that a bit.
Sure. TSA is looking to try to have the process as touchless as possible on their end. So they started out by having it so that you don't have to hand in your boarding pass or your document to the TSA agent. They'll just look at it. They have technologies in place where you can just take your ID and insert it into a slot or without having to give it and hand it over to the TSA agent. So I know that we're having regular discussions with TSA at the Washington level to help work with them and get help them to develop the different processes to make the process more touchless. And we're looking, and as we have in the past, to pilot as many new technologies as possible here at LAX. We've been one of the foremost pilot center in the past. We've done a lot of new technologies with them, and so we're looking to reach out to them as well. But their objective is to try to make the process as touchless as possible, and they're doing that to some extent already.
Thank you. For Javier, how are the rooms being sanitized? Mattresses, pillows, bedspreads, cushions, etc. And can you also talk about the common spaces and amenities like pools and spas, what's being done for those at the hotels?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as mentioned, a lot of it being driven by the public health department. And here in LA County, a number of different protocols are being released here very shortly that deal with a whole lot of different services within a hotel. As you can imagine, we have a lot of different types of experiences you can have. For example, there is a restaurant, there's a bar. All these have protocols: restaurants, bars, gyms, fitness, pools, salons. Each of these have a different set of protocols that are all going to be involved with, in addition to the hotel portion, that will be applicable to somebody staying. There is a pretty detailed list of all things that are being required for a room. And the idea is, of course, that we are fortunate that hotels historically have done a very, very good job of maintaining high levels of cleanliness. We're taking what we have historically done, and now we're kind of elevating that even further. So there is really focus on all the cleaning protocols associated with following a lot of the CDC guidelines on hard surfaces, similar to what Dana was explaining about the electrostatic spraying. We have a whole series that is involved with not only the guest room, the linens. We're going to give you an option. Obviously, when you come in to travel now, there are some people who are going to be absolutely willing to and desire a daily service, which is great. There's also going to be people that don't want any service, don't want anyone in my room. We will be able to accommodate that as well, and folks that will fall somewhere in between. So we have the ability to be able to customize an experience all the way from the beginning to the end. We're using a lot of technology. Our industry has kind of been in that space for a little while now in terms of a arrival, being able to do it all mobilely, being able to utilize your mobile device as a key to a room. You can order food, etc., through mobile device as well. So a lot of that technology is in place now that we are now able to get to utilize at a higher level as people start traveling and returning back into space. We're looking forward to having people back with us. We're going to learn an awful lot by this. All the physical spacing, we're not going to be able to put as many people in spaces as we did before. Now, the good news is that a lot of LA County guidelines are allowing the use of outdoor space more than they have in the past. So that's going to be a benefit to us in restaurants and in bars and areas where people historically gather. So we look forward to welcoming everybody back and letting them know that the experience they're going to have is going to be a very good one.
Thank you so much. Stephen, this might actually be a question for you, or you might know something about it, but what is the concern regarding bringing people back to work with regard to if they acquire the virus while traveling? Does it then constitute a workers' compensation claim? Do you know about that?
No, I think this is actually, I think Javier was mentioning that he's on the LA County Resiliency Task Force. So a number of us have been invited to join these task force and subcommittees as well. So I sit on the corporate and manufacturing subcommittee to really make some recommendation in terms of things that we have to look at as we're going back. And so risk mitigation and liability became a big question in terms of how do we make sure, one, we protect the safety of the workers, but two, in case something does happen, then basically what happens then? So I don't think it's a clear, there's a clear answer right now, but there are a lot of folks in the insurance industries that are looking very carefully as well in partnership with corporate partners as well, because I think this is evolving very quickly. So it's very hard to define in every situation, because how can you prove that you're actually contacted or was being infected by another coworker? And if that's the case, what is the personal liability issue as well? So I think this is evolving. And the other thing that we have to look at is from a government policy standpoint, is this something from the private sector that they have to take care of on their own, or is there going to be guidance from the public sector and the governments as well?
Thank you. And this will be our final question, because I know we're just about out of time. But I'll ask this to Dana and Javier. How are you protecting your pilots, your attendants, your staff? Because obviously they're the ones coming in contact with a lot of these international visitors. So I guess for Dana, what are you doing for airline attendants, pilots, when they have layovers or long international flights? And Javier, just the same question about how you're protecting your staff.
So as I mentioned about the masks, I mean, that is, we continue to hear from healthcare professionals that that's one of the best things that you can do. And one of the reasons that we are taking a pretty strong stance on masks is because we want to be able to protect our workforce. So that's one. Two, we instituted way back when this all started a paid leave for any employee who fell into the high risk category as designated by CDC. They were basically allowed to take a fully paid leave of absence from the airline for an indefinite amount of time, so that they could reduce their risk and their exposure. We have, for all of our crews, we have instituted additional safety protocols where we are enabling them to have private transport to the hotels for their layovers, and they are able to, we are either orchestrating for food to be delivered to the hotel so that they are able to eat in their rooms and they don't have to go out to get food, or we are working with the hotel if they're still providing some level of room service. That's another option that we were using. But a lot of hotels during the shutdown period have restricted or eliminated their room service or in-room dining. So we are doing that so that they don't have to go out to get food, limiting exposure that way. And we are rolling out this week in Minneapolis testing for our employees. Let me back up. We've been taking temperature of all of our employees before they report to work. That's been in place for over a month now. So people get their temperature taken as they report to work, and obviously if somebody is sick, we expect them to call in sick before they get to work. But if somebody does have a fever, we are sending them back home and asking them to quarantine. And then we have been covering testing for our employees, fully paid for months. So here in LA County, it's been free, but that hasn't been the case across the country. So we've been covering that for all of our workforce. And we're actually, as I was saying, starting this week, we're rolling out in Minnesota where we are going to be testing both for active virus as well as antibodies, all employees in Minneapolis, and we're going to be rolling that out across the workforce. So we are taking this very, very, very seriously. Right now our positive numbers are below the our infection rate is below, for our workforce, is below the infection rate for the general population, as well as in many of the cities where we've seen spikes. Our infection rate is below the level in those cities, but we are going to be rolling out the testing so that we can continue to track it and take immediate action if we see any changes in the numbers.
For us in hotels, in Marriott and my hotel particularly, one of the biggest challenges we have is we have a very, very limited number of people that are actually working. So a whole lot of our staffs are still not at work yet. For those that are here, we've also instituted many of what Dana's spoke to. We've had temperature checks from the beginning, and we have ensured everyone is got the appropriate personal equipment to take care of themselves as they perform their job duties. But we've got a very, very limited number of people who are actually working. For us, what we see as one of the big challenges is that we start to onboard more of our team back into the workforce. So we're going to need to require to do a lot of training to have people understand the job they did when they left is not the same job they're going to be doing when they come back to. Understanding what that means in terms of physical distancing, understanding in terms of how a job is being performed now. So before anybody is actually able to even get back into their workspace, they've got to undergo a full day of training as to what we have done and what are doing differently than what was done in the past. And we want to make sure that the environment in the workplace is as safe as we possibly can make it. We all continue to learn. CDC guidelines continue to evolve. More information is made available to us, and as we do, we want to make sure that we're providing our staff with the best and most up-to-date information that we have in order to be able to create the best working environment possible.
Thank you so much. One of the perks of my job is that I get to take delegations of our members on some of these wonderful travel programs, and I've been hearing from so many of them about how much they are ready to see the world again. So thank you so much for the time to discuss this with all of us. And Stephen, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. And to echo what Jessica was saying, I think we've seen the challenges that we face as a region, and when it comes to economic development, where it's really the focus of what World Trade Center and LAEDC's focus is, we've seen this huge number of employment rate, to what Javier was talking about and to what Justin and Dana was talking about. It's really impacted our community in a very negative way, with over 40 million people filing for unemployment insurance throughout the nation and over 1 million in LA County alone. This is now starting to creep in. We're seeing an over 24% unemployment rate in Los Angeles in April and going into May. However, through this conversation is giving me hope that things are starting to change, and we're hopefully starting to look at the recovery phase. And it's definitely heartening to hear all the hard work that each and every one of you are doing to help our community get to that recovery phase. So I want to thank you all, not only for taking time out of your busy schedule. I can only imagine all the different things that you're working on. We heard a little bit about it already, but for you to take time to join us to share some of these really important lessons, because I think all of us are looking for that ray of sunshine that will be just down the road. And it looks like that we're going to be heading towards that direction, but it's not going to be an easy path. So once again, I want to thank all three of our panelists, Justin, Dana, and Javier, for all the work that you do on behalf of Los Angeles as we're looking towards recovery. And Los Angeles being this global center, your work is actually impacting not just Los Angeles, but folks from around the world as well. So thank you for that. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. I'm going to pass it back to Kim for the closing statement. Thank you.
I can't agree with Stephen more. Dana Debel and Justin Erbacci and Javier Cano, it was such a thrill to have you here with this inside information on how you're going to help us all get back to traveling and keep us safe. So thank you so much for your time today. We have a terrific lineup of programs for you all next week. June 15th, we have Brazilian Ambassador to the U.S., His Excellency Nestor Forster, who will be discussing the ambassador's vision for the future of U.S.-Brazil's relationship and the ongoing trade negotiations between the two countries. June 17th, we focus on race relations during a pandemic with a stellar panel, including Michael Lawson, President and CEO of the LA Urban League, Helen Torres, President and CEO of HOPE, Charlie Wu, Board Chair of CAUSE, moderated by politics professor Dan Schnurr. And of course, next Thursday, we have Dan's weekly series, Politics in the Time of Coronavirus. Please check out all of our upcoming programs. You can see it on your control panel. There's a gray bar that says handout. Just click on that. Please visit our website at lawac.org to register for our programs, become a member, or make a donation. Please, everybody, stay safe, stay informed, and we hope to see you soon. Dana, Javier, Justin, again, Stephen, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.